Good evening and welcome to Real Talk, where every Sunday night we offer insight, education, and resources for in-home caregivers and those affected in their world. These are the children, the parents, the extended family, and everyone who loves them. And our goal is to offer real-life topics and learning through discussing real issues and offering real solutions. Tonight, I'm very excited to welcome our guest, Meredith Brough, who's a mother of 5 children and a sleep coach for children 0 to 6 years old. She's also a child care expert with almost 30 years of experience. Meredith has developed an intuitive sleep coaching program and skills that have been really amazing. And I've gotten an opportunity to get to know her a bit. And so I really wanted to bring this on and share with you because it's a little bit different approach than a lot of people take. It really is focused on paying attention and responding in a different way. And it first started by caring for children in an in-home daycare and raising her own children over the last 15 years. And so she founded a company called Sweet Slumber in 2017 and turned her passion for helping mothers and young children into a full-time job. And tonight we're going to kind of dig into that and really look at what it's like to work with challenging babies where sleep is concerned, because too often a lot of sleep kind of programs have a one-size-fits-all approach. And that is not the case. We are all individuals and so are these babies. And so when I started to really learn about what Meredith does, I really got kind of excited about the fact that there was somebody out there offering something a little bit different. And so I'm really, really excited to share that with you. So first off, Meredith, welcome. I'm really glad to have you tonight.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. So I want you to tell us a little bit about your journey. I gave kind of an overview, but tell us a little bit about how you got here and how this developed a passion in you, because I know it's a passion in you. I've seen it.
Thank you. Well, what I love about my story is that I came from just loving children and taking care of them. Being a mom of 5, that came because I figured out how to improve sleep with my second child. And my life was just so enjoyable with babies because I was rested and so were they. And that kind of crossed over into, as I ran a daycare, I wanted to share this information with these families and help bless them so that their lives were so much more enjoyable. And they were working moms. So it's even harder to be able to function and enjoy life if you're sleep deprived and nights are terrible. So it was something that I did to help them. The things that I teach my clients now, I would just do hands-on with these kids. And then within a week, they would go home that night and sleep for 8 hours. It was just this beautiful thing. And then at some point, after many, many years, I worked with a family who just really, really needed me. And the other families needed me too, but it wasn't life-changing for them. This family that I helped, the mom was ready to either give up on life or on her children. They were twins, and they were so difficult. So I actually took care of these babies for a few days for her, brought them back again, sleeping 8 hours at night at 2 months old. And it changed her life. And that's where it hit me that this is a really big deal and that I need to do this full time. So it changed my life at that point.
Right. And that's certainly something that you and I share as a commonality for supporting families and helping this period of infancy, which can be very challenging, to be more enjoyable. And there's a lot of information out there around sleep. A lot of it good, a lot of it not so good. I tell my students all the time, read up and learn as much as you possibly can, but take the good and leave the bad. Tell me very quickly, before we kind of really dig into this, give us just a really brief overview of what it is that you believe or what it is that you're teaching, because your approach is a little bit different.
Yeah, I like to think it's a lot different. So the first thing I do I have a group on Facebook called Successful Sleep. And so that's a lot of times where my clients are coming from in our first interactions. And in there, I'm just really big on educating parents on what's going on in their child's life. And I think that's a good place to start because you need to understand your child, their temperament. You need to understand if they're going through different growth spurts or mental leaps, teething, and how that affects sleep, especially for your child's temperament. And then I just really help moms understand how to then be in tune to their child. So let's mother from the heart. Let's follow our gut. Let's not ever turn that off. And then from there, it's how do we then teach these kids without being forceful and without being desperate either? Because I know that's a normal feeling, and then we act on it. But it's just so important to take our time and to do things right. And so I give parents the tools to work with their children, cooperate, to show them how to fall asleep and not just expect them to figure it out, how to feel good and secure and safe when they're by themselves. So that's a pretty good summary of what I'm all about.
Mhm. No, I agree. And your point of desperation, parents, all people make poor choices when they're desperate and they feel like they have no options. And so I love that you address that that is a reality of how people feel sometimes. That can be so huge. So I kind of want to dig into this a bit. I want to help our audience have an understanding about why it is that some babies can be so challenging when it comes to sleep. You know, we hear sometimes about the, oh, my baby slept through the night, you know, pretty much almost from the day they came home from the hospital, or I did everything wrong and my baby slept through the night anyway. And you know, I know that there's a lot of parents that want to just reach through the screen and throttle somebody or punch them for for that. But the reality is there's a lot of babies that are more challenging. What causes that? What makes them more challenging?
Well, there's three factors that I see all the time. It's often illness when they're very young. It's some type of disorder or way that their body's not functioning right, which could be from tongue or lip tie or reflux or some type of food intolerance or allergy. That can cause a lot of trouble. I've had people come to me thinking they had really challenging babies, but once they figured that out, they had very easy babies. And then temperament is a big deal because they're not all the same. Just like adults, I try to help people understand this. Look around you. Are all the adults the same? Do we have the same personality? Do we handle stress the same? Some of us are sensitive. Some of us are really laid back. Some of us are anxious, right? And that's how kids are too. And so it's really important to identify all those differences in kids. And all of the tools that are out there for families are geared towards easy kids, angelic, textbook, or predictable kids. And so pretty much anyone who has a child like that can just go to these different resources and try any one and they'll work for their kid. But that doesn't work for the kids who have some sensitivity or lots and lots of energy. And there are children who we would call high needs or spirited, and they have a lot of challenging traits and a lot of challenging aspects to who they are. And so they need something different. And then the last thing is development. So a lot of kids can go through mental leaps, growth spurts, teething, and just have a little bit of disruption is no big deal. But there are a lot of babies out there who have terrible reactions to these periods of time, and it disrupts sleep in every way. And that's when moms and dads get desperate.
Hmm. Absolutely. And if I'm hearing you correctly, basically, the foundation of what we're looking at here is trying to get to the source of the problem
Hmm.
and then responding to it. Am
Yeah,
I understanding that?
yeah, that's perfect.
Hmm. So these main three factors, and I would agree with you that these are the kind of the three things that really can impact sleep in negative ways and in challenging ways. If these cause poor sleep, that makes things more difficult for parents, especially if they're not really familiar with babies. And it also means that there has to be kind of a shift, a change to understand how to meet these unique needs and how to help these babies. And I would say, at least in my experience, most sleep resources out there don't provide that. So let's talk about that. Share with us a little bit around that.
Yeah, I mean, people come to me all the time saying, I've tried everything, I've read everything, I know everything. And it makes it really hard for them to have faith in me. I find that really sad, but I understand. I do. Like, yeah, of course. I was actually just thinking about what you were going to say right before you asked it is, what do these people do? Where do they go? Some of the resources that I've found have been very geared towards spirited or high needs babies. And when I found those, they actually helped me, sorry, helped me in my journey. So I found the book Raising Your Spirited Child by Mary Kersinka, and she breaks down all these different traits into chapters. And it's not a chapter on being demanding or a chapter on being intense. It's more like, these are all the traits. Now let's talk about all of your life scenarios. And she does have a chapter in there about sleep. It's not very long, but it was just enough for me to start to understand the differences in these kids and how sleep is different for them. And, from then on, it was just through experience. But there are other resources out there. You can Google about fussy babies, and you can Google about spirited and high needs babies. You can also find resources on Facebook, and that's just really good to know. Dr. Sears writes a lot about all the different traits that are challenging, and they have different perspectives. One of them might say there's 6 traits, another one will say there's 12, and I agree with that. There's a lot of them. Sensitivity is a big deal. So anything you can learn about sensitivity, I find that is the one main factor that makes these babies different. And I'll explain that a little bit because these are the babies who, when they're tired or hungry, not overtired, not over hungry, they're more fussy. They're hard to settle. They're hard to soothe. And they cry. And they can't just lay in bed and let you pet them. And they can't just lay in bed and look around and fall asleep. That's the difference in the temperament. Those angelic or textbook like babies I mentioned earlier, they're able to just sit and look around and kind of relax, and they just fall asleep. Or the sensitive or more fussy babies, they don't feel good. They don't know what to do with that, and they don't know how to settle themselves. So they really truly need help. So that's kind of going back to what you said, like figure out what it is that makes your baby different and what it is that they need. Because when you read the other resources, they're all going to say, don't pick up your baby. They're going to say, this is going to work, but it won't. So you have to be able to look at what's different about your baby, follow your intuition, and just throw out what you've been reading because it's going to confuse you and make you crazy.
Yeah, I agree. I actually read a study probably a few months ago, that talked about that there's a genetic factor and that there are children, you either have that ability to calm yourself down and soothe, or you don't. And if
Hmm.
we're just throwing everybody all into the same basket, then we're not meeting the needs of those children who don't have that natural ability. And I think, at least for me, when I was talking to parents and about that, it was kind of a relief because so many parents kind of think, oh, this is my fault. And as a culture, we tell parents, oh, you must be doing something wrong. And a lot of times they're not. And I
Yeah.
such a big thing. So, if we're talking about these three main factors and how these impact sleep, how do these how does that translate into what methods or what approach you take that are more effective with these babies?
I'm so glad you asked because all the things that I've been mentioning are just not common knowledge. And moms are just lost and they're out there blaming themselves and thinking they did something wrong. And they just don't realize that these are babies that we can't force, we can't push. They actually need something way more gradual. One of the things I like to teach people is when we make big changes for ourselves, we take baby steps. And that makes those steps or those changes permanent. And it's a lot more doable for us. So if you approach baby sleep that way, it's going to be more doable for you and your child. You're not going to feel so stressed out or even so anxious about making the changes if you just look at it as, what can I do in little steps to change my child? I also believe in phasing out old habits and introducing new ones. And that doesn't mean because someone has asked me about habit stacking. It's not the same thing because I'm actually trying to get rid of the old way of doing things, which might be feeding to sleep or bouncing or rocking to sleep. And side note on that, I'm not against those things. I'm very, very much into intuitive parenting and what's natural and what your heart tells you your child needs. And I don't ever want moms to think those are bad things. But we can empower children to be able to connect sleep cycles and put themselves back to sleep at night. And you really want that. If you're someone who's sleep deprived, you really want that. So, um, going along with that, you don't. It's not a bad thing to do those things, whether it's nap time, bedtime, or in the middle of the night. It's just if we can empower the kids, then it's going to be better for us at night. And then I also believe it's fine to respond with feeding in the night because, again, that's intuitive. It's what your child is telling you they need. So I know this sounds complicated. It is a little bit, but I do have a podcast and I teach moms a lot of these pieces in my podcast. So please, we'll share that information, I'm sure. Tune into that because you can start to understand more about these little principles. So I just think the biggest key is being able to phase in the new habits, phase out the old ones, do things gradually, take your time. So I actually have a couple of methods that I've converted. I share them. I've written some articles and I also have videos in my Successful Sleep group on Facebook. Those are the things that I openly share. It's like I've modified pick up, put down and the chair method to show moms how to do that. Really, it's just about doing something for a few minutes. So do pick up, put down for just a few minutes and then feed your kid to sleep the old way. And then we try to build up that first part of it where we're doing pick up and put down longer and longer. And I don't mean in 10-minute increments. I mean, a few minutes, maybe even just one. It depends on how sensitive the child is. So I don't know if that was a good answer, if I gave you too much information.
No. It's really good. And I think having a concrete example is really great because we can talk about these ideas. You and I deal with babies and we deal with sleep all the time. But for parents that maybe this is their first child, or maybe for a nanny who has always worked with toddlers and is now working with babies, these concepts aren't as familiar. So having an example and sharing a little more is actually a really great way to help them understand. I want to talk for a minute kind of about what babies need. Because so many times, a lot of the methods that we see, the ones that you talk about that work with the babies that are easy, are just do this, this, and this, and you're good to go, and it works. And you know what? You're right. For the easy babies, those things do work. But for our more challenging babies, for the ones who are having a harder time, what do they need from their parents or a caregiver when it comes to supporting them and comforting them? And kind of, what does that look like?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of things. One, they really, really need you to be responsive. They do. They need you to be there for them. And that does not mean you have to rush every time for all babies, but some kids actually do need you to rush because they're very intense. They wake themselves up all the way. They get hyper, so we have to really understand that this is what happens if I wait with this child. So like you said earlier, there's no one size fits all. You have to really understand your child. So giving each child what they need, the real definition of fairness, right? And really being in tune to them, trusting the instincts that you have inside, that you have the best answers is beautiful and perfect because you will figure it out for your child if you just give yourself a chance. And then the other thing that I focus on a lot is teaching little ones to be secure. And you do that by meeting their needs. So that's level 1. Level 2 is now let's teach them to be secure when they're alone. And that's a really big missing link for a lot of the methods that are out there is, we're just expecting that we can shut the door and the child will work it out, or that we're doing those time checks and they'll work it out. But a lot of these kids are going through separation anxiety. And something that I've read recently about separation anxiety is that babies actually don't have any type of reassurance that they're ever going to see you again when you're out of sight. That's a really crazy concept. That's scary. So when your child's super clingy and driving you nuts, please think about how is it that they're feeling inside. It's not just babies are irrational. They actually have some fears. They have some things that they're worried about. So teaching security just really deepens their sense of being okay. So instead of looking at self-soothing, for me, I look at let's build this sense of security, teach them trust, teach them to be very comfortable in their bed, in their room, feel safe, know that you're always going to respond. And then they kind of let go and they just relax. Sleep becomes more peaceful. They don't wake up screaming in the middle of the night. They just feel a little bit more reassured. It's something you can teach to help them connect sleep cycles. That's a really big deal and a really big part of my work.
Mhm. And so if I'm a parent and I'm hearing this and I'm hearing you say, respond to them, feed them if they're hungry, meet their needs, um, and that sometimes these changes need to be gradual, especially with our more sensitive babies. My instant thought is, how long is this going to take? Is my child going to be 17 before they actually sleep? So give us a little insight around that.
Yeah. Well, the longer I've worked, the more I've helped parents understand that their timetable is definitely not their baby's timetable, especially if they're going through these periods of development. The biggest culprits for me are the mental leaps and the teething, because they can affect sleep for weeks, teething for months, and it's excruciating. It's painful. It's so hard. So on your own, sure, it really can take a couple years. Like I just had someone post about this yesterday in my successful sleep group, and all these moms came on and said, "Yeah, by 2, by 3, my kid was sleeping well." And I was like, "Oh, ladies, back up. I can help families in either the 4 to 6 week mark, or it can be 2 to 4 months. Because if these kids are going through leaps and teething and they're so sensitive, there's very little that we can do to change that. So I'm also big on let's do everything we can. Let's use herbal and homeopathic remedies. Let's help them feel well. Let's find the things that work to make those periods a little better, a little easier, and that will help you be able to work forward, but also help your child not be so needy and so exhausting at night. So honestly, it takes affirmations and hard work, and it takes really, really just, I mean, I think you need a support system. You need to ask for help. You need to have a therapist. It can take a while, and we can't force these babies. But the things that I teach help them learn as quickly as possible.
Mhm.
So that's a blessing because that means a few months instead of a couple of years.
Right. And a few weeks or even a few months sounds a whole lot better than 2 or 3 years to most parents. And I love that you talk about the fact that that having support for you as a parent is important. Um, you know, from a standpoint of looking at history, we have not always been isolationists like we are now. We used to be culturally grouped differently, and there was a lot more community support. And when that doesn't exist, seeking outside support can be so, so critical. And I love that as a culture we're talking about that more. I love that you brought it up, and we will continue to espouse that as well. That you're not an island, and the more support that you have and that you can reach out for can really make a difference in your ability to get through this. And when you as a parent are feeling supported, you're better able to support your baby.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really big on that too. And I know it's hard and sometimes people are isolated when it comes to being without family or they don't have the money to be able to spend money on a night doula or a nanny. So I just really want women to be resourceful. Let's look at Facebook groups and community groups that can support you. Find resources because they're out there.
Absolutely. So, before we wrap up for tonight, Meredith, is there anything else that you want to share? One final takeaway for our audience
Well, I forgot to mention that I teach non-crying methods.
tonight?
So it's not just about your instincts or just following my examples. I actually have 4 that I've created for different temperaments and needs. And so I just want people to understand that uh, these resources are there for them. And I also have lessons on the separation anxiety, how to improve that, and how to deepen a sense of security. And you can find that information in my programs. I have a membership site too. But I love supporting people, parents and moms, either way, any way that I can. So that's why I have the Successful Sleep Group, and that's why I have my podcast. So I just would love to have you continue to learn from me because I have a lot of moms tell me that I retrain them and that I guess in a way I set them free to be the mom that they want to be, and they get to let go of all these fears and rules and and just mother from the heart, like I said.
Yeah, and that's huge. And so I love that you have that as a resource for parents. And we will have all the information on how to get a hold of Meredith and learn more about that. One more final quick question for you, Meredith. Do you work with people in person or virtually or both? What does that look like?
That's a good question. So I actually do both because I have people who live in my community. I go into their homes and I work with them. But because I want to help as many people as I can, most of my um, teaching, the programs that I offer are either online or it's coaching over Zoom or FaceTime or the phone. Um, I've figured out how to teach parents to do what I do, like the stuff that I know intuitively. I've figured out how to pass that on and have you do it yourself. And so I don't find that I'm supporting families in the middle of the night. I'm not having to do anything like that. It's just empowering parents with knowledge and tools and skills, and then they just get to work.
Fantastic. So thank you for joining us tonight on Real Talk, Meredith. It has been an honor to have you and an honor to learn from you. And I love that you've shared some really insightful takeaways that will challenge us to think a little bit and to look at things a little bit differently. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
Absolutely. So if you have any questions around this topic or anything related to helping challenging babies get better sleep and ultimately families get better sleep, put them in the feed and tag Meredith or tag Newborn Care Solutions, and we'll make sure that you get answers. And if you're wanting to rewatch this segment or catch any of our other Real Talk episodes, pop on over to our website at newborncaresolutions.com and click on the education link. Or you can find all of our Real Talks on YouTube. You just use the search engine and type in Newborn Care Solutions Real Talk, and they all come up. So thank you all for joining us and have a fantastic night.